So what I hope to share with you here this morning, in all honesty, is a bit of a scenario about how focusing on a consumer need has ultimately benefited producers. And then talk a little bit about how the role of genomics and the science behind genetics really is an important component moving forward that really ties to some of the questions that came up earlier about the use of different management programs such as whether it be ionophores, whether it be hormone usage and so forth. Once you have trust of consumers, you can do a lot of things for mutual benefit. Without it, it's a head-to-head battle, but with it, we can do a lot of things that allow us all to be sustainable. So I want to talk about how do we focus on consumers as opposed to ourselves as producers. And that's not easy to do sometimes. The consumer is a long way away, aren't they, from ranching country. When we talk about consumers, remember that we are consumers. I don't think it was that long ago, as we talked about branded beef, where this is as far as we could see, right? As we talked about branded beef several decades ago, it was all about what was facing the producer. It really didn't tie to consumers whatsoever. And I still run into producers today who struggle to accept the reality that consumers will, whether we want to or not, will have an impact on how we produce the products that we expect them to buy. If we involve them in that process in one form or another, we can find a way to move forward that is financially rewarding for production agriculture and delivers a product to consumers that they're excited and willing to buy. That turning point really came in the early 90s when the first National Beef Quality Audit was conducted. And that's when we began to really understand that the consumer is king. And they will tell us, verbally and with their dollars, the things that we need to do to continue to earn their trust, to continue to earn their business. They're happy to buy our products if we deliver what they want. If they value your product, they pay up for it. If they don't, they choose something else. And the thing that really begins to drive home is that if we as a community in the beef business or in the pork business, in the poultry business, it doesn't really matter. If we want to continue to grow and prosper, the only source of new dollars from which to build our foundation of our business comes from one source, and that comes from the consumer. That in and of itself is really the key understanding to really transitioning our mindset towards what's in it for me. Because what's in it for me depends on what's in it for them. And really that comes back to really creating a pull-through demand strategy, if you will, and it's not that complicated, okay? The key is that if we exceed consumer expectations that they have, and they could be related to sustainability, they could be related to production practices, they could be related to taste and flavor and juiciness. If we exceed on those expectations, they're more than likely going to buy our product again, aren't they? We tend to go back to places we know where our risk is reduced on whether or not our expectations are going to be exceeded. So we exceed their expectations, we build repeat business, we create benefit across the entire chain. And this is what our certified Angus beef business model is based on. Consumers are willing to pay more for the brand. Restaurateurs and retailers therefore pay more to distributors of the product. Distributors of the product then in turn pay more to the packer. The packer in turn pays up for cattle that can hit the mark. Feed yards pay more to commercial producers, either in direct purchase or through the sale barn for those kind of cattle, and ultimately those commercial producers pay more for registered genetics that can meet that market demand. And if we do that repeatedly, then ultimately we strengthen demand for beef. Trust with consumers is hard to get, but it's very easily lost. Typically, when prices go up, we expect consumers to back away, don't we? We expect consumers to back away and spend their money differently, to spend their money on maybe more affordable items or cheaper items. We had some questions about what's affordable, okay, earlier in the day. Okay, then obviously we saw a sharp reduction in fed cattle prices, a sharp reduction in feeder cattle prices, and box beef as well, and that's reflected from 2015 to where we're at currently in 2016. Okay? But we would think intuitively that these record high prices that we've seen have had to have pushed consumers away from premium products. It's had to. But here's the reality. This is the growth chart for certified Angus beef since its inception. And you can see right from this point right here 2008, that's BSE. We all remember that. Sorry to bring up bad memories for all of us, okay? But from 2008 to the current year, that's the trend in certified Angus beef sales. And I share that not because it relates to certified Angus beef, because other premium products have experienced the same thing. Okay? And so when prices have gone up, sales have gone up. Weber grills, Haagen-Dazs ice cream, I'm told, experienced similar results. Does it mean consumers didn't value price? That because prices went up, they bought more? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. What it means is, here's what we've learned. We've learned that consumers don't buy on price alone. If they did, they would have been buying 49-cent chicken leg quarters that entire time. But instead, what they value, or what they spend their money on, is the things that they value. Their purchasing decisions are a decision based on price in relation to value. We're all willing to pay a little bit more if we know the value is higher. Consumers do have choices out there, not just within beef, but across proteins. And even when beef is cheaper than it is today, it's still not the cheapest in the meat case, is it? It's not the cheapest on the menu. This chart plots average retail values in the U.S. by protein. And you can see, if you go back to where we were a number of years ago, in 2000, okay, beef in 2000 was 7% higher than pork, 78% higher than chicken. Then with drought, with herd liquidation that we saw really across North America because of the economics of the business as well, we saw the herd get smaller, we saw supplies tighten, we saw beef prices go out of the world, which in some cases was very positive. And what we saw from the consumer's perspective, that now I'm shopping the retail store and beef is 75 or 57% higher than pork and over 200% higher than chicken. We're going to ask them to pay more, we got to deliver more. And more as defined whatever the consumer values. If it's a production method, if it's taste and quality, okay, we've got to be prepared to deliver more. From our case at Certified Angus Beef, delivering more really comes back to this one simple premise. Why do consumers choose beef over pork or poultry? It's not because of price. It's because, selfishly, we believe beef is the protein of celebration. Okay, all great events in life happen around beef. Okay, and milk for the dairymen in the room. Okay, but we believe that taste is a big part of that. People buy beef because of its inherent taste. Okay, and delivering on that taste is extremely important because taste is king. And if given choice between buying beef that tastes like a shoe or beef that delivers above their expectation for quality, tenderness, flavorness, and juiciness, that price-value relationship kept intact, they will choose taste and quality every time, creating a value-added opportunity for us as producers. And from what we've experienced as a brand, this series would be the reported wholesale demand index for certified Angus beef, as well as for USDA commodity choice. And you can see as prices got higher, we saw consumers, they didn't money down and just pay less. They became more discriminating in where they spent their dollars. And they chose to pursue where the value proposition was less of a risk, in this case with certified Angus beef and other premium brands of beef that were out there, increasing that demand substantially over the last several years compared to a commodity market, commodity demand that remained fairly flat. And so those producers who were in line with that demand curve in red experienced opportunities for financial gain. And what can be done when genomics, when management, when genetics are in line with consumer demand and consumer needs. Here's the real thing I want to drive home. This brand and other brands as well, focused on quality, okay, managed to grow over the last several years. What happened to the national cow herd, the North American cow herd during this time right here from 2008 to 2014? Did it increase like we might suggest by that red bar? No, it declined immensely. And so what we did through genetic selection, through the use of tools that are out there, the things that we're talking about here, is we used those tools that were available and we took a smaller cow herd and produced more of what consumers wanted. And that's what created the value and the demand. You want to talk about risk management? That may be the single best risk management we had as an industry By taking that period of time with tight resources, delivering more of what consumers wanted, and honestly kind of making it through that time period without losing a lot of steam in terms of demand for high-quality beef. What's also important is, again, producers tell me, pay me for it, and I'll target it. And I agree with that approach. And I think as we talk about where the value is created, this graph here, really, if you focus on the table there towards the bottom, this last year, we put 12% more cattle, more certified carcasses on the market, and the spread between choice and USDA choice and certified Angus beef grew 48%. We put more on the market, and the spread between the commodity product and the consumer-focused product increased. Again, I think driving home the point that if you meet consumers' demands, if you focus on what the consumer wants, within reason, obviously they'll choose to dedicate their dollars that direction. In history had been that we tend to focus on what's good for us, and then we try to push something through the system, go produce what we want, and then try to go recruit a buyer. The model that works today and the model that we see replicated throughout North America with branded programs today is a model of find out what consumers want and then build a supply model that fits that within reason. I think that's a choice. Is commodity beef going to be defined as it was 10 years ago at 40 to 50 to 60% select in the U.S. or a high percent of AA? Or will the bell-shaped curve stay there, and will we just shift it? Will we just shift it? And commodity beef tomorrow can be higher quality than commodity beef was a decade ago. And I think that's a good thing, because if we deliver more good eating experiences to consumers, even with the commodity category, we win as an industry, we win as a beef community. From a Canadian standpoint, many of you know that we've been producing certified Angus beef in Canadian plants since roughly 2002. And you can see that just the improvement in certification rates among those Angus cattle that go through the plants that we work with increase as well. And so we're seeing it throughout North America, that consumer signal is being sent, and many are listening. And the dollars are in that area too. We tend to always talk about the choice select spread, or the spread between AAA and AA. Really, the value is being created between choice, or AAA, and premium products. And then prime would be on top of that. And so as producers, we need to oftentimes step back and look at the data differently. Instead of talking about the choice select spread or the equivalent, it's talking about where the value is being created, where the demand is being created. And the dollars do flow. This is just some data that we capture. What we know today is that packers are sending $1 million a week back into the production chain in the form of certified Angus beef premiums alone. And we see that in other brands as well, when cattle are sold on grid or value-based systems also. The best part is, with the things that many of you in this room are involved in, okay, we can have our cake and eat it too if we're intentional in what we do. Okay? If we're intentional in what we do. It was mentioned earlier, the average certified Angus beef acceptance rate is 28.9%. Okay, we know that there are operations out there that, because of intentional use of genetics tools that are out there, can easily hit in excess of 80%. And so again, it's focused on the things that are important to consumers, but making sure we're taking care of things at home. And based on those correlations between marbling and other production, maternal traits and so forth, we know that we can build a cow herd that works on grass, on pasture here in the provinces, here in the prairie provinces and so forth in Alberta, and we know that we can still deliver a product that meets the needs of consumers. We can have our cake and eat it too. And this here just drives that home some more, that we can have a shared focus on consumers and cows, just looking at the genetic trends for $W in the American Angus Association database and marbling EPDs. And so it's not a matter of having to choose, you can do it both. We talk about sustainability, the questions about use of hormones and other technologies that are there. In all honesty, what we begin to see is that the genetic world, the genomic space, probably holds the most keys for driving home or driving greater efficiency into our production system than anything else. More so than what we see in many cases from the management side of implants and beta agonists and so forth. And I think that's important, because genomics are going to be the key that allow us to continue to drive efficiency in producing the kind of products that consumers desire, that consumers want. I mentioned this a little bit, it's been mentioned throughout the entire morning, is that while consumer understanding of beef production isn't very high, actually it's very, very low, their interest is extremely high. There is an interest in understanding what we do in the beef community like we've never seen before. And what we're finding is that there are gaps in their knowledge, okay? And those gaps will always be filled. They will never remain empty. And it's really about engaging customers, consumers, and helping them understand, what we do. And it's interesting, this is just a little survey that was done at the National Restaurant Association show, I think back in March or May in that area, there in Chicago. And it was done by Meiden Marketing, what were the top 5 takeaways from talking to participants, restaurateurs at that show. And the first one was that they're interested in trust and transparency. And that was talked about quite vividly here earlier today. And we know that consumer trust is elusive. And we talk about the other thing that I want to tie into is the story matters. The story matters, and consumers want to know more and they want to understand more about the mechanisms and the process at which their proteins are coming to their table. Obviously, premium is in, we like that one, and fat is back. Buying beef is an economic decision based on that price-value relationship. But I've heard it mentioned a couple times here before, but it is made with emotion. And I know I'm a scientist. Well, I'm really more science type. That's why I'm not in academia. I wasn't a very good scientist. I'm science type, okay, in my approach. And what we tend to want to do at times, I think, is rest on the science, rest on the data, and educate customers, educate consumers. The reality is we've got to understand that they're going to take that information, they're going to apply emotion to it, and they're going to formulate their opinion based on that. And as an industry, as a beef community, as an agricultural community, I think we want to be careful. We don't want to drive the emotion out of buying protein. Because the emotion that's around the dinner table is really what drives this business. It's about connecting with the consumers and have them have emotion about helping you be sustainable in what you do. Get them passionate about understanding and supporting the way of life that we all value. It's very important that we balance that scientific approach of educating consumers with the emotional need they have to connect with what we do.